Chapter 1. Ricker and Haley had just made it to the large, glitzy hotel. The man they were looking for, Darren Harmon, wasn't that far ahead of them. They tried to head him off at the club he visited first, but they were just a hair too late. Harmon first popped up on their radar after texting a buddy that he was going out that night to some bars and clubs to find some women he could have his way with. He mentioned in the text he had something extra to help him in that regard, leading Jones to believe he was going to drug someone. Jones found out Harmon booked a room at the hotel, though he didn't have enough time to find out the room number. It took him a little time to find out which bars Harmon liked to frequent. Since the information came in so late, the team didn't even have time to stake out Harmon's home address. When they got the alert from Jones's program, they immediately started hitting bars and clubs in the area to try to find the suspect. Once Jones finally found the bar Harmon was likely to be at, and when Ricker and Haley arrived, they learned from the bartender Harmon had just left with a woman on his arm. Upon arriving at the hotel, Ricker and Haley showed Harmon's picture to a few people and asked if they'd seen the man, hoping they'd get lucky. Unfortunately, no one did. After asking around, Ricker and Haley looked around the lobby, trying to figure out their next move. Ricker touched the comm device in his ear to get in contact with Jones. "David, we're striking out here. You getting anything?" Jones was feverishly typing away, trying desperately to come up with a room number. "I'm working on it." "We don't have much time. It's not going to take this guy too long to do what he came here for." "I know. I'm just about there." Haley then tapped Ricker on the arm. "We might as well start walking the halls. It'll give us a head start. Maybe one of us will be nearby when he finally gets it, or maybe one of us will hear something walking by." Ricker nodded. "If this girl's been drugged, we're not likely to hear anything. But it's a good idea anyway. I'll do the even floors, you do the odd. Let me know if you find anything." Ricker let Jones know what they were doing as the two silencers broke up and started roaming the halls. The two men quickly walked down their respective floors, looking and listening for any potential signs of the man they were looking for. Even though they knew it was unlikely they were going to find anything, that was all they could do. They had to hope the woman would be able to scream, leading them to the room, or if she had enough energy, run out of the room if the drugs hadn't taken full effect yet. But they still knew their best chance at finding them was Jones. It was a 20-floor hotel with almost 1,000 rooms. Without some type of fluke occurrence, Ricker and Haley knew they were basically looking for a needle in a haystack. As Ricker walked through the first floor, Haley was done on the second at basically the same time. They each walked up their respective stairs to start searching the next floors. "Chris, anything?" "Negative." They continued the pattern for a few more floors until Ricker and Haley were on the 5th and 6th floors. By that point, their hope was about to evaporate, even though they had a good chunk of the hotel still left. They knew there was nothing else they could do on their end. As they reached the end of their floors, Jones lifted their moods. "Got it. 12th floor, room 1226. "On the way," Ricker said. Ricker and Haley immediately raced up the stairs to get to the 12th floor, though Haley was closer and would get there first. Upon getting to the 12th floor, Haley threw open the door and ran down the hallway until he reached the room in question. He took a quick listen at the door, but didn't hear anything. He had to take it on faith that Jones was right. If not, it would be quite embarrassing to walk in on someone who didn't have ulterior motives at hand. He also didn't have time to wait for Ricker, even though he wasn't too far behind. Haley slowly jiggled the handle to see if they had the good fortune of it being unlocked, but they weren't that lucky. Haley took a few steps back and was about to kick it in before he remembered it wouldn't work. Jones had already told them the hotel doors were much stronger than residential doors, due to having to meet a high fire rating and being aligned with steel. It was likely security would be there long before Haley was able to kick it in. He took a few steps toward the door again and knocked loudly. "Room service?" Haley shook his head, figuring this had no chance of working. He figured he must have seen at least 100 movies where something like this happened, and he always thought it was ridiculous. It would never work. He knocked loudly again and looked down the hall to see if Wrecker was in sight yet. He wasn't. Haley put his fist on the door and was ready to pounce on it again. Before he could, though, the door swung open. The man on the inside seemed quite displeased. He had to answer the door for something he didn't ask for. "I didn't ask for any room service," the man angrily said. Haley immediately recognized Harmon from his picture and pushed the door open further. "What are you doing?" Harmon asked, backing up. Haley didn't bother to respond. Instead, he let his fists do the talking for him. He reached back, curled up his fist, and unleashed a right hand that struck Harmon's jaw, sending the stunned man down to his knees. With the man not being a threat for the moment, Haley took a quick look around the room and saw a woman on the bed who was only wearing a bra and underwear. She wasn't moving, and at first glance appeared to be sleeping, though Haley suspected she was knocked out with the help of a drug. Haley turned back around to face Harmon, who had gotten back to his feet and now also had a weapon in his hand. Harmon had removed a pocket knife and was holding it in his right hand as he faced the intruder. "I don't know who you are, but you made the wrong move coming in here," Harmon said, trying to sound tough. Considering Haley was an inch or two taller and about 20 pounds heavier, he didn't feel much of a threat from the man. Seeing as how all he had was a small pocket knife, and Haley had a gun he hadn't pulled out yet, it was all the more unconcerning to him. Even without weapons, with all the hand-to-hand combat training he'd received over the years, there weren't many men Haley would feel uncomfortable facing. "Is this the part where I'm supposed to wet myself?" Haley asked. "Tremble in fear for what you might do to me?" "You have no idea who you're messing with." Haley smiled, seeing Wrecker standing in the doorway behind Harmon. "Well, considering there's two of us, I'd say you better stand down." Harmon shook his head. "That's the oldest trick in the book. I'm not falling for that one." Wrecker didn't say a word. He brought his gun out and took a good hard blow to the back of Harmon's head with his weapon, knocking the suspect to the floor. Harmon was out cold. With the situation in hand, Wrecker took a step inside and closed the door behind him. He then stood over Harmon's body for a few seconds. "Sometimes the oldest tricks are the best," Wrecker said. "Girl's over here," Haley said, pointing to the bedroom. "She all right?" "Don't know. Didn't get a chance to check yet. Looks like she's knocked out. Either that or she's a heavy sleeper." Wrecker knelt beside Harmon and checked his pulse. "He'll be all right in a few hours. Besides the lemon on his head, he's lucky that's all he got." After kicking the knife to the other side of the room, Wrecker and Haley went into the bedroom to check on the woman on the bed. As they did, Wrecker let Jones know Harmon was subdued. "David, we're in the room. Looks like we got here a little too late." "Oh no," Jones said. "Is she dead?" Haley stood next to the woman and checked her pulse. "She's alive. Gonna wake up with a headache, though." "Let's be thankful that's all she'll have. How you want to do this?" Wrecker asked. "The woman's knocked out. Harmon's knocked out." As they were talking, Haley started moving throughout the room, looking for some evidence. He was hoping Harmon didn't use his entire stash and that he still had more drugs out in the open somewhere. "I'll call the police and tell them there's a disturbance in that room," Jones said. "What good will that do?" "They'll see an unconscious woman on the bed and do testing on her and hopefully discover some illegal substances in her system. I'll make sure I tell them I think the woman was taken against her will or something. Don't worry, she will be in the clear." "This might help," Haley said, standing by the dresser and holding up a clear bag. It had a dozen small, round, white pills inside. Haley put his nose by the opening and took a whiff, but the pills had no odor. "Hold on. Looks like Chris might have found his stash," Wrecker said. "Excellent," Jones replied. "I'll put the call into the police now." "What if she wakes up disoriented before they get here?" "Can you tell how many pills she's taken?" Wrecker looked over at Haley, who shook his head. No, there's no telling how many were in here to begin with, or how much is in her system, Haley said. Considering they didn't have that big of a head start on us, and the fact she's already knocked out so quickly, I would say it's safe to assume she's got quite a bit in her. Then I'd say it's not likely she'll wake up before they arrive, Jones said. The police should get there within 5 minutes. What about Harmon? Haley asked. How incapacitated is he at the moment? Very, Wrecker answered. Then leave him and get out of there. Roger that. Wrecker and Haley looked at each other. Time to hit the road? Haley asked. I'd feel better if we tied this idiot up first. Wrecker looked around, but didn't have anything to bind Harmon's hands together. Wrecker did the next best thing and dragged his lifeless body over to the closet. Haley opened the door for him, and Wrecker stuffed Harmon into the closet. Once they closed the door, they brought a chair over and nuzzled it just underneath the knob. It was unlikely Harmon would wake up before the police arrived, but Wrecker wanted to be certain the criminal wouldn't make a surprise escape. With Harmon safely tucked away, Wrecker and Haley quickly left, scurrying out of the hotel before the police arrived. Just as Wrecker and Haley had gotten to their car, they noticed the police cruiser pulling into the parking lot. Looks like things are good here, Wrecker said. After letting Jones know the police were there, Wrecker dropped Haley off at his apartment before going home for the night himself. They both came back into the office early the next morning, since Jones said it looked like they were beginning to get a heavy workload with some new cases coming in. Wrecker was the last to get there, as usually seemed to be the case lately. It wasn't that he was late, as it was only 8 o'clock, but the others didn't have a pretty girlfriend that prevented them from getting in earlier. But he usually made up for it by stopping for breakfast for the three of them. As Wrecker made it into the office, though, he could tell right away something was going on. Haley was being still and silent, a telltale sign Jones was working on something and nobody wanted to disturb or distract him. Jones was sitting at his computer, flailing away at the keyboard at an unusually fast rate. Unusual in how he worked in an everyday manner. It was quite normal for him to act that way when there was something important and urgent going on. Should I ask? Wrecker said. Haley looked at him, his hand covering half his face. You shouldn't. Well, he did say we had a heavy workload coming up this week. No, this is not that, Jones said. Oh, he is here, Wrecker said with a fake smile. Wrecker put the bag of breakfast sandwiches down on the table as he maneuvered his way behind Jones to see if he could tell what he was working on. You know I don't like you sneaking up behind me when I'm trying to ascertain something, Jones said. Well, I'm sorry, Professor, but you know you would make things easier on us all if you just come out and told us what the issue was. Jones stopped typing for a second and turned his head to look at Wrecker as he made his way to a chair next to him. There's been a killing. Wrecker didn't sound impressed. There's always a killing. 2 of them, to be precise. Wrecker looked at Haley, still not seeming concerned about the matter. Okay. Would you like to tell us what makes these 2 killings so important? They're people we know. The look on Wrecker's face turned more serious. Now he was concerned. He knew it wasn't Mia, since he'd just left her apartment and she wasn't going into work today. He quickly ran through the list of all the other people he knew, though there was one name that quickly jumped into his mind. Tyrell? Jones stopped typing again to look at him, though this time he had a quizzical look on his face. No. Why would you think such a thing? Because he's the closest person I know, and you haven't told me anything else. How about you ending our misery and telling us who's dead? Oh, Jones said, almost seeming unaware he was keeping them in suspense. Well, it's 2 members of Vincent's crew. A look of relief swept across Wrecker's face. Is that all? You shouldn't do that, you know? Is that all? That's all the emotions you can muster? Wrecker said, looking over to Haley for guidance, though none was coming. He then shrugged. Sorry? Do you not see the significance of this? Recker looked up to the ceiling, hoping the answer would somehow fall to him. Nope, I guess not. What's the significance? The significance is the undisputed mob boss of this city, a man you know, a man we've worked with and have a business relationship with, has lost 2 members of his team. And, Recker said, seeming very unconcerned. To be honest, I'm still kind of ticked off at him for that whole police thing he got us involved with. So excuse me if I'm not exactly shedding a tear for him in this trying time. Regardless of that, you don't just go around killing members of his squad without expecting some kind of blowback, Jones said. And you think what? It's going to come back on us? He's going to think I did it? Perhaps. Won't happen. Or that we'll know something about it. Doubt it. Or that he might expand on our business arrangement and try to get us involved in his business, Jones said, fearful of getting into a larger conflict they had no business of being involved in. That could be possible. Even if none of that's the case, that still brings up a bigger issue, Haley said. I think I can anticipate what you're about to say, but go ahead anyway, Jones said. Who's dumb enough to take out a couple of Vincent's men? There's a couple more questions to add to that, Recker said. Which are? Jones asked. Did someone take those guys out, knowing they're Vincent's men? Or was it just dumb luck? They didn't know what they were getting themselves into. I wouldn't call taking out Vincent's men any kind of luck, Haley said. Bad luck, maybe. I have one more question to add to that, Jones said. Which is? Recker asked. Do we have a new player in town? Recker and Haley looked at each other, wondering if that was the case. Heck of a way to state your arrival, Haley said. Can you think of a better one? Recker said. If you're going to come in here and challenge Vincent and try to take a piece of the city away from him, you better do it in full force. And you better announce yourself and your intentions early, because if you come in here and try to dance around, he'll chew you up and spit you out. So, how are we going to find out? Or are we? I think we'll know the answer to that if any more of Vincent's men drop in the next week, Jones said. Or if he retaliates, assuming he knows who did it. Or we could put some ears on the street, Recker said. What do you have in mind? Who's the best guy we know at that? Tyrell. If something's going on, he'll find it.